Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be learning chapter 15 of Tanya. We're going to be finishing the review of chapter 4, the last page of chapter 14. It actually comes with a very nice summary of the first 14 chapters, the section, and then I'll give you an intro to chapter 15. I am concerned. I haven't checked yet on the Kindle. There is a chance that on the Kindle it's not going to have the conclusion. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear us now?
I may be able to hear you now. You want to try?
Can you hear us now?
Maybe I was muted, but okay.
Hello? Hello? No?
If you're looking in your book, we're going to turn towards the end of chapter 14. And I'll pull it up on the Kindle as well. Let's see. And I'm going to try to pull it up on the Kindle. You still can't hear me. Oh, yeah, I don't know why. Does anyone else want to test and see why? Let's see.
Boker Tov,
you want to say something? Or someone else?
Boker Tov.
Oh, yeah, I can't hear any of you guys. Hold on one second. I think I figured out why.
I just unmuted myself. No.
Let's pause this for the record. I paused it for the echo, but it's back on now. Thank you.
And also, is Shira back on?
So Shira's on. Shira, you can see us, right? Yeah. Okay, good. I got a thumbs up there. Perfect. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So, we'll start from the top over here. We'll start from the top of 178. And really the conclusion is beautiful. We're in the middle of a nice flow over here. It's the idea of working on your meditation, that even if you're not becoming a tzaddik, to strive for tzaddik-like moments. So, and we know the tzaddik is working on the emotions on the inside. So let's wrap up this chapter, which we kind of had to conclude abruptly last week. So we're on the top of 178 in the book. Or if you're looking on the Kindle, which I shared the screen, it's toward the top. It says like this: attaining some of the positive emotions of the tzaddik, however, is more difficult, since the above tactics we use for negative emotions won't work. Taking pleasure in God is not easy for people who are preoccupied with the experience of the five senses. For this, you will probably need special assistance from God. And when you will make it your habit to rejoice with your soul in God, through meditating upon the greatness of God, since with an awakening from below, there is an awakening from above, perhaps with all this effort, a ruach, which is a spirit, will pour upon him from on high. So these are taking quotes from the Zohar and Isaiah. The first quote is just an incredible one. What Hashem tells us, these are Aramaic words in the Hebrew. It's good words, it's Aramaic, but it goes like this: Isarusa dilatata and Isarusa dilaela. It means an arousal or an awakening from below and an awakening from above. Well, we know, and this is an important tenet of Judaism, a person could have awakenings in their lifetime. They feel inspired, they feel motivated, they feel good, and they want to change. And what happens is, after a day or a week, they find themselves back in the same rut that they were in a few days ago. And they're like, what happened? I was so inspired. I was on fire. The difference is where the awakening begins from. If the awakening begins from on high, which means there's some inspiration from a higher source that takes you over, what happens is, as long as that awakening, that high emotion, that high spirit is there, is present, you feel good. But as soon as it leaves itself, you're kind of left as you were before, meaning it was kind of lifting you up, raising you up, but at some point you fall back down. At some point you're not being guided anymore, and you're back to where you started. The difference is, if you have an awakening from below, which means you're the one that triggers it. You're the one that begins that work to be inspired. It starts from in you, not from an outside source, no matter how lofty. Then it's something that it becomes more permanent. It's something that becomes long-lasting. Just the proof is in the pudding. The fact is like this. With the story of the giving of Torah at Sinai, what happened is there was a full feeling of spiritual ecstasy that God overwhelmed us with love. It was the point where we were lifted up to such a high place. We were on a high. We were a tzaddik. But you know what happened days after we were given the Torah and we were on such a high? We fell down pretty low. Moshe left us. He went to receive the rest of the Torah. And we somehow managed to sin with the golden calf, which actually tomorrow, the 17th of Tammuz, commemorates that day when we were caught sinning with the golden calf. Meaning there was such a great inspiration. It says God descended on the mountain, meaning God brought himself to us. But it didn't really last. We were back to square one, and even worse, a few days after. The difference is, what we needed to really do is make it ours, to start it, to strengthen ourselves. And what happened the next year, we started building a sanctuary for God. And we initiated, we began the process and building and working, and that was a much more long-lasting, that's how God came into the world as a result of our efforts. So that's a powerful statement here, that even if you're not going to fully reach the tzaddik level, but realize that if you do your awakening, if you do your work over here, God will support you and God will gift you with an experience from on high.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I thought you were going to say the opposite, that if it came from God, then it's more likely to last versus it coming from yourself. For example, when I did my 28-day juicing,
yeah,
that was came from me, that was my idea. I wanted to be healthy and I was very committed, 100%. I did it for 28 days. And then after that, it was pretty much like mission accomplished, and I've not been juicing since. It was just like too difficult to maintain. So what do you have to say about that? When you have an intention, you have something that you really want to do that's going to better your life, it's coming from you, from your desire or from your want or wish for yourself, versus maybe something like if it had been a spiritual thing that maybe had come from a higher place, it might have driven me to continue with it every single day for the rest of my life.
So that's awesome, Maddie. First of all, very good. First of all, the idea that you're able to do 28 days, I don't think I could manage a day of it. So hats off. That's awesome. And there has to be that perfect combination where, imagine, take a relationship. If the wife always has to ask the husband, could you do this for me? Could you do that for me? And he's happy to do anything. So he's like, of course I'll do that. But at some point you want him to initiate. Every night asking, could you get me a glass of water? At some point you want him to get the cue to do it on his own instead of being asked to do it. And that's really, once he does it on his own, a relationship could be built. Because as long as she's telling him what to do and he's going to do it, or vice versa, there's something inherently lacking in that relationship. It's not necessarily a dangerous relationship. It's just there needs to be more strength in that relationship. Not always is he going to read your mind and initiate, but as long as he's initiating, you could guide him along the path, and you could instruct him. What I'm trying to say is, in the words of, I may have mentioned this last week, I don't know, but God says, I want you to open up for me like the eye of a needle. Open up a little bit. I'll do the rest. God says, let me in and I'll guide you. But God wants us to initiate. As long as, we all know this when we go to high holiday services and we feel inspired, and then it kind of wears down after a few days, is because the inspiration came from the high note that the chazan hit, or the nice sermon of the rabbi, whatever it is, but it's not me. The ultimate is really when I initiate a relationship, and then I build on it. So of course, Maddie, you're 100% right. It's God guiding it. But in order for that to happen, I first of all need to show up. And not only show up, I need to put myself fully into it. Because if I'm just allowing it to be nurtured from on high without my involvement, it's lacking. So once I put my involvement in, you have to open yourself up to Hashem's gift and nurture and guidance. and realize that it's coming from Hashem, and that will keep you going. So actually, Maddie, you bring up a very good point. If it's only me involved and I'm not really reciprocating in that relationship, allowing God to guide me, then it's just me. And then you're right, it's not going to last because it's just coming from me. But if ultimately I start it and then I say, God, what do you want from me? How do we build on this relationship? The same with every husband and wife, any spousal relationship. It's going to be a similar thing where you start it and then you build on what the other person is gifting within your relationship and the experience. Exactly. So involve God. I see that. Let me just also take Shira. We need to take action and join Hashem. Thinking about Pinchas, which is this week's Torah portion, and he took action and was rewarded with priesthood, whereas Moshe was being guided solely by Hashem. He was not rewarded with priesthood, but of course was the greatest prophet. It's a great example from this week's Torah portion. Well said, Shira, that in this week's Torah portion, Pinchas took action. He saw something that was inappropriate, something that was being done that was not allowed to be done. And he instead of waiting for the inspiration from God, he took the action, and God, as a result, reciprocated with the beautiful gift of the kahuna, of the Kohen, which was gifted to Pinchas. Awesome. All right, let's see a little more. Unlike the negative emotions of detesting evil, which you can learn yourself, the positive emotion of pleasurable rejoicing in God requires some additional spirit granted to you through the grace of heaven. While this might come to you as a result of your sustained efforts, it is by no means guaranteed. That is why the Tanya stated earlier, a person does not have a significant degree of free choice, whether he will experience a steady, pleasurable love. What exact form does this spirit from on high take? So this is I think it will be, it's all about joy, so let's understand this. And if this happens, you will merit that the spirit of the soul root of a particular tzaddik will be impregnated into you, enabling you to genuinely worship God with joy. As the verse states, that only tzaddikim are joyous with God. So this is a very Kabbalistic idea. In Kabbalah terms, it's called ibor. But let's read the next paragraph and try to explain it. The ultimate goal is to feed off a tzaddik to experience true joy and pleasure in your relationship with God. That it's not based on my delight in it, it's based on the joy, the genuine, pure, unadulterated joy of just being in a relationship with God. Not because of what I'm getting out of it, but very pure. To do that, you need to feed off a tzaddik, and that's called an impregnation. Let's see what that means. Oops, sorry guys. What that means is like this. Soul impregnation is a kind of reincarnation that takes place during your lifetime. So for the Kabbalistic minded, we know that reincarnation is actually after, it's a Jewish idea, that after a person passes, their soul comes down into a different body in order to finish a certain mission. So, and I actually gave a couple of years ago, it was in the summer, I gave a class at Vivian, I think you were there, to the Chevra Kadisha Assembly. It was a national conference that took place here in Marin, and I gave a long class on reincarnation. So it's a pretty Kabbalistic idea, but in one sentence, we all have the obligation, the mitzvah, to fulfill all the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. It's impossible to fulfill it during one lifetime because you can only fulfill certain ones. If I'm a Kohen, for example, there's certain mitzvahs that apply to me that don't apply if I was an Israelite, if I was Israel. If I'm a man, there's certain mitzvahs that apply to me that if I'm a woman, there's certain mitzvahs that apply to me. So the same soul would actually, fragments of it would go into different reincarnations. So I'm not going to get too much into it, but this Kabbalistic idea is a little bit different. Over here it's saying that even during my lifetime, there's some sort of reincarnation that takes place during my lifetime, not after I passed, which is the standard form of reincarnation. This is a step up. This is a Kabbalistic idea 2.0, reincarnation, that it's taking place during my lifetime. So let me just explain what it means. Where by divine decree, a spark of a departed soul joins yours. When Ibor occurs, you become impregnated with a second dimension of spirit, often from a departed tzaddik. This enables you, to acquire some of the departed tzaddik's qualities. And this is taken from different sources. You can see some pretty high-end Kabbalists in the 1600s telling us that sometimes the second soul impregnates themselves within you. It's probably just for a temporary time. But during that time, that spirit guides you and you're able to raise yourself up. And then you will have truly fulfilled the oath that you were made to swear before birth to be a tzaddik. So just going back to one of the original points over here, we know from the opening line of Tanya, which is actually where the name Tanya for the book comes from, is from the opening word of this book, is called Tanya, which means we have learned in the Talmud, in Tractate Nida, where it says that our soul was given an oath before coming into this world. Be a tzaddik and don't be a rasha. And what we have been explaining is strive to be a tzaddik. But even if you realize that the tzaddik level, to work on your emotions inside, is not something that you're equipped to do fully, at least don't be a rasha, work on your behavioral control. But over here in this last section of chapter 14, we're saying that there are moments when you could be like a tzaddik. During prayer and during holier times, have work and meditate once a week or once a month to work on meditating to get your emotions on board. So even though you're really Beinoni working on your behavior, there are times when you should also work out a little bit on your emotional, on your inner self, on your soul powers. And this last point is saying that there's a power of Kabbalah called impregnation, where a spirit of a tzaddik that has passed and needs to fulfill another purpose will stick to your soul. It's called an impregnation. And during that time, you have this second dimension of spirit. And at that moment, you could be truly a tzaddik. You can have that tzaddik-like moment. So let's just finish this, and then we'll take the questions. This poses no contradiction to Job's statement that God created tzaddikim, which implies that if your soul was not given the ability to become a tzaddik, you cannot achieve it. Because in this case, the Beinoni did not become a tzaddik on his own. He required a little of someone else's soul to do the job. As far as his own soul was concerned, he did not have the capability of becoming a tzaddik as Job has taught. So that's a note. If I'm not mistaken, those notes are teachings of the Rebbe. Okay, let's just take some questions, and then we'll do a summary on these chapters, conclusion, and then we'll give an intro to chapter 15, which hopefully should be really nice. I didn't realize reincarnation was a Jewish thing too. Yeah, Maddie, actually a lot of people are a little surprised. Resurrection, reincarnation, those are very Jewish ideas. It certainly needs to unpack what they mean. But Kabbalistically, a lot of times when we meet other people and you either feel a strong attraction towards them or a strong repulsion away from them, a lot of times it's because of a soul connection, positive or negative. But just to play one more Hasidic idea in a very, this is Kabbalah 101, but explaining with a little bit of Hasidus, which is the foundation of the books we're learning now. Everything happens not by chance. Nothing happens by chance. Everything is not a coincidence. Everything is by divine orchestration. Everything is exactly planned. A lot of times, we only see a very small image of a much bigger, beautiful picture. In the reminder I get of this, I haven't been to New York in months, which usually I try to go a couple times a year to be by the Rebbe's resting place in New York, and to be in Crown Heights, the hub of Chabad. Several people in the Kol Shira, you've been with us, Vivian, you've been there with us in Crown Heights. They have a beautiful museum. It's called the Jewish Children's Museum. Literally, on an average year, millions of children, all public schools, go through and learn about Judaism in a sixth-floor building of teaching Judaism to children. So like one entire floor teaches the 6 days of creation. And you walk through a fake supermarket where you learn about kosher. It's very hands-on. It's incredible. I have a sibling there whose children have an annual membership to go to this museum. But in the front of the museum, there's a bunch of pictures of children. I'm talking about a mural that's made up of maybe 10,000 pictures that takes up a huge wall in the front of the museum, that if you're standing right in front of it, you see a beautiful picture here, you see a beautiful picture of children smiling. But if you take a step back, you'll see this incredible mural of one big face of a smiling child with beautiful eyes. If you're standing very close, you don't see it. But if you take a step back, you'll see a much bigger picture. A lot of us, we ask questions. I don't get what God's doing to me. And a lot of times we don't know the answer, and that's okay. We don't have to know the answer to everything. But a lot of times there's a much bigger picture. It's not only seeing my whole life in a bigger picture, that you have to take a step back and meditate. A lot of times there's a lot that you don't even know what's happening because it happened in previous lifetimes. And you're here to help a part of your neshama that either was abused at a certain part, spiritually, emotionally, physically, psychologically, and now your job is to uplift it, and you're on a different level. So anyway, this is not a reincarnation class. I'll suffice it to that. But yeah, it is a Jewish idea. Thank you, Maddie. Was Moshe reincarnated? I think I remember reading about him asking Hashem to let his soul fully rest at death and not be reborn. Okay, nothing is coincidence. So we don't know everyone's neshama, but they say that Moshe's neshama is reincarnated, if I'm not mistaken. For an example you gave before, Shira, was about Pinchas, which is this week's Torah portion. Pinchas became the soul of Elijah. Elijah lived, some 800 years, 1,000 years after Pinchas, and he was reborn in the soul of Elijah. I guess the term reborn maybe sounds a little odd just because of a Christianity lens. It may make you think or feel a little differently about it, but it's not reborn. It's a reincarnated soul. You're here to rectify a certain element, a certain weakness of the soul from a previous generation to strengthen it. So there's a lot about reincarnation we could actually talk about. And if it's something people want, maybe we could give a summer lecture or class on reincarnation. Maybe that would be a good thing. But okay, awesome. Let's see. I would love to do this conclusion. I'm glad it's also in the Kindle edition. And it's really just a few paragraphs, but hopefully it'll give us a nice perspective, and then we'll be able to jump into chapter 15. So here we go. Conclusion of chapters 1 to 14. The first 14 chapters of Tanya stand out as a self-contained unit because it is here that the author lays down the core elements of his worldview. Right? The author is the Alter Rebbe, the Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Hasidism. And his worldview is like this: principles on which the rest of the book is based. The series of questions posed in chapter 1 are finally answered in chapters 13 and 14, providing closure to the interim discussions. Chapter 1 to 14 also represent Reb Shneur Zalman's response to a problem which is probably shared by most people seeking his advice. So imagine, if for those that were in our class all the way in chapter 1 and in the introduction in November, we look at Tanya almost as a private audience with Alter Rebbe, saying, I've got problems. And the Alter Rebbe is guiding you and nurturing you on a spiritual path to help you through these problems. So one of the things probably the Alter Rebbe was being asked that was the foundation of these books, of these chapters, is like this. Rebbe, however hard I try to connect to God, I feel like a failure. I want to come close to God. But even when I succeed in religious practice, my inner demons still bother me. I have peak moments when I feel close to God, but they are not sustainable. What should I do? Will I ever succeed? Such great questions. We all have these questions. In a nutshell, the Tanya's answer in chapters 1 to 14 is, you have both conscious behavior, which is thought, speech, and action, as well as a deep emotional core. I guess I would call it subconscious, but that's not the words he's using here, so let's just continue that. The Torah and its mitzvahs guide you in how to connect your conscious behavior to God in the most profound way possible at every moment of your life. That's where your focus should be. Your deep core will probably never change and will continue to taunt you with selfish urges for the rest of your life. But that doesn't mean you failed. Actually, the fact that you can't completely change your deep core means that it's not your mission in life. The purpose of your existence is to fulfill your soul's promise to A, connect your conscious behavior to God at every moment, which is don't be a Russia, and B, to develop the strongest emotional connection to God that you can. Try your best to be a tzaddik. It will probably always be a struggle, but God has tremendous pleasure from your ongoing efforts. If you have a phone and you want to snap a picture of this paragraph, or if you have the book at home and you want to put a bookmark on it, it's a very, very powerful paragraph. To realize that there's something within my control and something that's not. What is in my control is my behavioral conscious, working on my thoughts, speech, and action. That's called being a Beinoni. And that's something within the reach of me, within the reach of you. And it's okay to still have selfish urges. It actually means you're normal. It actually just means you're not a tzaddik. But realize that even if I can't fully fulfill and change my emotional core, realize that the reason why I'm here is not to work on them. The reason why I'm here is to focus on my behavior, to be connected with God. How do you focus on your behavior? By connecting your behavior with a mitzvah. Every mitzvah is a behavior, either my thought, speech, and action. Learning Torah is a behavioral thing in my thought, speech, and action. Eventually, when you do that, it's going to also affect and reach down into your core. And it's okay to have a struggle. But that struggle is an incredible pleasure by God. That will actually be a perfect segue into chapter 15. So having concluded now chapter 14, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. I would love to, I see one more question. Find this comforting. Yes, the class and reincarnation, please. Awesome. Okay, Maddie, you got it. For sure. Okay, so I want to give an intro. We're already halfway through the class. So now I want to segue into chapter 15. What we know so far is that we have, let's just do a quick momentum review from chapter 9. We know that we have a struggle going on inside of us. It's called the Nefesh Elokit and the Nefesh HaBahamis, which means we have the godly soul and we also have the animal soul. We have the soul that is thinking of God and selfless, thinking of the greater good, and it's God-driven. And you have the soul that is thinking about itself and selfish. So there's chapter 9 introduced that we have these two souls, and there's a war going on there for control over the kingdom, which is the body, which is our behavior, our thought, speech, and action. And then we said the way the war plays out. In the tzaddik, the war was already won. The animal soul is voided to the point where you could even have a second level of tzaddik. You have two tzaddiks, two categories of tzaddik. A tzaddik where the animal soul was voided, which means he doesn't have a voice anymore. He's neutralized. Or the animal soul that became an ally. The animal soul that turned and became not only not an enemy and void, he actually became your friend. The animal soul is working on your behalf and getting excited on Torah ideas, getting excited on a mitzvah, fully emotionally to the core. That's his joy, and he gets the emotions generated as well. On the contrary, you have a Rasha, which has also two categories of Rasha, but totally to the wicked. A Rasha means a weak person, not an evil person robbing a bank. A Rasha just means a person who gives in to his weakness. He has an urge and he acts on it. He can't control himself, try as he may. So you have a Rasha who still has a conscience. He feels bad after what he did. He wants to do teshuvah, but eventually it's a revolving door. He finds himself in the same mud a week later or a month later, whatever. It's not the quantity of how often he's doing it. It's just the idea that he's going to give into weakness. It could be once a year, but he's still a Rasha because he's giving into his weakness. He's giving into his temptation. And it's not even temptations that are so bad and fantasies that are so inappropriate. It's the idea of something that he just wants. He'll go for it. He doesn't practice impulse control. He could try, but he's not working on it. It's not working. And we introduced the most fundamental is the Beinoni, which the whole Tanya is called the book of the Beinoni. The Beinoni is one who has control over his behaviors, but his emotions, his impulses are still feeding him from his animal soul, which means his animal soul is chai v'kayim, which means his animal soul is alive and well, is healthy, is strong. He's feeding you things to think about and feeding you words and anger that you should be feeling. But the Beinoni knows that on the outside, his thought, speech, and action, he's going to be strong. He knows that I could be a Beinoni for these 60 seconds, and I could be a Beinoni for the next 60 seconds. And it's actually something ingrained within each and every one of us to have this impulse control. And the number one thing we already started by saying is, because by nature, mind controls over heart. That was chapter 12. And we continue that in chapter 13 and 14, explaining it. Now, what I want to do is in chapter 15, there's a it introduces actually two types of Beinoni, which is a very powerful idea. We'll see it more as we go in the inside. I just studied it a little bit quickly before coming on today, and it's based on a verse. There's a verse that says, verse from the prophets, where it says, I have seen, a prophet saying, I have seen those who are servants of God and those that are not. A servant is someone that's a chariot, someone who's just in a relationship with God, and whatever Hashem wants from them, they want to do. Service, not necessarily is it always enjoyable. You can have a servant who's doing it because that's his job and he signed up for it, but he's not always in the full enjoyment and love. A child is always in a love relationship. They love their parent and they can never disassociate themselves. A servant is doing a service, which means he's putting in effort to get it done. It's the one who sees results because of lots of efforts. Tanya teaches us in chapter 15, a person may be saying, looking at themselves as a Beinoni, that there's so much effort. Where do I see the result? Where do I attain that final level? Where could I rest? Where could I get a graduation ceremony and say, I could throw my hat off and say, I did it. So chapter 15 introduces to us that it's not just about the end result. It's about the journey. It's that constant struggle, like we saw in the last line of chapter 14. That struggle itself, that effort that you're putting in, is causing the greatest pleasure and joy by Hashem. The war itself is something beautiful. And even more, the war itself allows your true growth to take place. So we'll see in this chapter, there's a concept of an Eved, which is a servant, and an Oved, which means, for those that understand these terms, one is a verb and one is a noun. An Eved is a noun. It's who he is. I'm a servant. That's an Eved. An Oved is not necessarily who he is. It's a verb. What that means is he is serving. He may not have attained the full level of servant, meaning maybe it's not how he defines himself, but he is in service. It's more of a verb. I hope that made sense between a noun and a verb. A verb is the Oved, is the one serving. He's in service. So it's not necessarily who he is, it's actually what he's doing. He's serving. So an Eved, which is the verb, he's a servant, that's like the tzaddik. That's who he is. You look at a tzaddik and he's a servant of God. You see it in his true colors. The Beinoni, not necessarily is a full servant, but he is in service. He's putting in constant effort in making it happen. He's in the middle of the service. But now you could also have a category of a Beinoni that is not serving. He's a Beinoni, but he doesn't have a lot of struggle. Until now, we were learning about a Beinoni who is always struggling. He has impulse coming up that are not appropriate. Oh yeah, I could take care of that, Maddie. Hold on 1 second. Let me. I'm not sure where it's coming from, Maddie. Let's try something. Hold on 1 second. You could have a Beinoni who's struggling. It's the one we've been learning about. But then you could also have a Beinoni who, in plain English, I'm going to give you a word for it. Some of you may get offended, but you could have a Beinoni who's like a nerd. He's a goody-goody. He always does the right thing, and he doesn't have a lot of distractions. Like, he doesn't like sports, or whatever it is. Okay, I don't know the exact example of a nerd. I guess everyone has their own imagination, but he doesn't derive his pleasure in negative things. he just does the right thing and it's easier for him. So this is a person who's not necessarily a tzaddik, meaning he's not gifted emotionally with a pure emotion, but he doesn't, at the same time, he's a Beinoni, but he doesn't have such a struggle. I don't remember if it's going to be in the words of Tanya, but it's a Kabbalistic idea where in Hebrew the terms are, he's mitzunen betivo, which means he's cold-natured. Not cold like in a disrespectful way, but cold meaning he doesn't have deep passions and excitement and blood boiling to things. Like he doesn't get excited with something inappropriate that pops up. He's more cold where these things don't excite him. So for him, a Beinoni is not such a struggle because he doesn't have this strong impulses that are taking him over, and it's a battle during prayer and a battle after to keep himself high, to keep himself warm. I'm hoping I don't know. I definitely didn't spell it correctly on my paper here. That I have some notes that I wrote up over here, but I don't know how it's pronounced. It's anhonistic or he's just cold in terms of he doesn't have deep anhonistic something. I don't know the exact term, but anyways, it's in Hebrew it's called the mechutzer hana. He's a goody-goody. He does the right thing because he's told to do it, and it comes natural to him to want to do it. So one Beinoni, I'm basically introducing two types of Beinonis. One is by nature, and one is by nurture. Whether it's his nature to just want to do the right thing, or it's training himself by nurture till it becomes a second nature. But that's a Beinoni who's just doing the right thing without too much of a struggle. So most of us could look at this nerd and say, wow, he's so lucky. He doesn't have the same impulses that are taking me over day in, day out. It becomes easy for him. So the Tanya over here is going to introduce the coolest idea. It's really one of my fundamental ideas, and it's taken me a while to get to this fact. But it's like this. The Tanya is going to introduce to us that the effort that we have in being a Beinoni, the struggle, and that impulses that are coming up, that's actually golden. It's actually precious. It's so incredible to have that struggle where we are battling. And that's really where the greatest growth will take place. The Alter Rebbe is going to quote a Talmud section where it says like this. It's a really cool part of the Talmud, where it says, in the olden days, a person learning now, the average is right now to learn 4 times in order to get something. That's actually the way we're supposed to study Talmud. If you really want to get it, you got to study it 4 times. Then it really sinks in. But in the olden days, they would actually study every piece of Torah 100 times. That's what they did. Now it seems like impossible, but that's how many times was average to study over and over, repetitive. Then it gets ingrained in you. So the Talmud says that when is the real study taking place? When you learn for the time number 101. When you learn for the 101st time. Because the first 100 times, that's normal. The 101st time, that could be counted as real learning. That's when you're learning above and beyond. And the Talmud itself, to explain that, the Talmud says that in the olden days, there were rates when you would, nowadays you rent cars or let's say you catch an Uber or a Lyft. In the olden days, you would catch a donkey ride. So if you wanted to rent a donkey, this is the olden days, there were rates. If I'm going a certain distance, it's called 10 parsas, which let's say is 15 kilometers or 8 miles, whatever it is. If I wanted to go a certain distance, it cost a 1 zuz. Let's say $100. But if I want to go 11 parsas, that's only 1 parsa more, it will cost double the price. It will cost 2 zuz. That makes no sense. if I'm traveling double the distance, then charge me double the price. But if I'm traveling only 10% further, I'm traveling 1 parsa more, how could I be charged a whole nother zuz? Because that's something out of the routine. The donkey is used to traveling this route. But if you want it to travel more than it's used to, it's going to cost a lot more because you're going above the average of what the donkey does. So in terms of the study, when I learned the first 100, that's part of the routine. That's the normal. When I'm learning for the 101st time, that's where the struggle is. That's really where you're getting the material. So realize, and I think even nowadays, I don't know exactly, but if you're leaving from the airport and you're going over a certain county line or city district, the prices hike up. I don't know if it's double, but it's the idea where you're going out of a certain boundary and prices are gonna, either the fare goes up much more than the usual rate. So the Alter Rebbe says that you can be a Beinoni, but realize that your job is in that struggle. Don't hope that one day I'm going to be free from it. Realize that in that struggle, that's actually where the greatest growth you will see is. And to use a political term, where you can feel the burn. When you have that struggle and you have that burn that's always fighting back and forth, that's where the main struggle is. That's where the main growth takes place. The main passion will happen. So let's just see. And from chapter 1 through 8 of Tanya was really the lexicon. It was introducing us to souls and the soul powers and the conscious, which is the behavior, the thought, speech, and action. Chapter 9, it's beginning the work with mind ruling the heart. And now it's a very organic flow where we established already the universal impulse control, that we each have that power to control ourselves. And I gave you the example before of the woman in the parking lot where she was able to practice self-control and hold on to her anger. But the question now is, how are we feeling while doing it? There's constant resistance. It's almost repression. And repression could hurt. And eventually you get exhausted. It's not sustainable. So we need more tools. So what the Tanya is going to start doing already from the end of chapter 15 is giving us some tools emotionally and allowing us to dig inside our emotions to make it more sustainable. So it's going to introduce chapter 16 and 17 is going to start introducing meditations and emotional feelings to work on, to get from the mind into the heart, to generate feelings inside of you that your soul could feel good through. So 16 and 17, I'm just going to peek ahead a little bit and give you guys a little bit of a spoiler. 16 and 17, in those chapters, the Tanya is going to already give you meditations of how to bring in emotions to help your godly soul in its battle and give it some oasis, give it some island of hope and emotional vitamins. And then in the next few chapters, from chapter 18 to 25, the meditation is not only on generating feelings inside of me through my meditation, it's actually, the meditations are actually going to be, this is really nice, to unleash positive emotions that I already have, that are just hiding inside of us. But through meditations, you trigger these emotions to actually come alive, and that these existing emotions that I already have become unleashed. And that's going to be another process, another project of Tanya, is to generate meditations that already reveal, that reveal emotions that I already have. And they're just hiding to the point where I don't even know they exist in me. But through the right tools of meditations, you're able to actually see. Okay, so let's see, hold on. That's right, Shira, chapter 15 is the Dina's favorite. This idea of really working on yourself and realizing that it's not necessarily a tzaddik, they arrived already. A tzaddik arrived at a certain level, now they're at a status, I'm a servant. I'm in a full relationship. The Beinoni is not fully arrived yet. He's working on it. And the beauty is, in that working, you have to realize that you're able to attain a level that otherwise can't be attained. Because when you go that extra mile, it's double the price. It's so much more work. And that's really where the golden opportunity is, in that work that you're putting yourself through. So I'll just end with, maybe we'll try to peek in a little bit, but just one last point. I just want to give it, to bring it home a little bit. A person could say, what I do on the outside, my thought, speech, and action, that I understand I have to work on, because it affects people around me. It changes who I am based on that setting. But my emotions, give me some respite. Let me enjoy my emotions. I won't ponder it. I won't act on the feeling, but let them come up every now and then. What goes on my inside is no one's business. And what the Alter Rebbe is going to be introducing in Tanya in chapter 15 and 16 is telling us that you should even be working on your emotions on the inside. Eventually, the meditation should also dig into your inside. And a person could be saying, it's none of your business, that's mine. So just to bring up that point with that, between a husband and wife, if a wife asks the husband to do something and he gladly does it, he says, sure, I'll do it. And he does it again the next day. But eventually he's not enjoying it that much. He still does it, it's a duty of his. He signed up for this in the ketubah. But really what the wife wants more than anything is his joy in doing it. It's not just that he's taking out the garbage, is that he's in a relationship in it. It's a hard thing, but the husband could say, it's enough that I'm doing it. You want me to enjoy it also? And logically, I would say, you're right, you're doing it, you're doing a good thing. And that would be enough. But over here, we're not just looking for what's logical and that the job is getting done. There's a lot more to it. The relationship is about building love. It's about developing a true, pure, deep connection with God. So it's not counting on record, how much did I do today for you, and checking things off a list. It's more, what opportunity can I have today to be in a relationship with you? So it's not about the logical part, where did I do it, did I not, could I check it off or not? It's about being in a relationship. And the relationship is not about the reward that I'm getting. The relationship is about being in it. That's actually the greatest reward, that I'm in the relationship. So just to reflect that in our relationship with God, for a Beinoni to say, I'm already giving God my action to do the right thing all the time with mitzvahs and Torah. God also wants my emotions to get involved in it and to meditate, to love what I'm doing. That's too much. So that's logically, I could understand that, because logically what I'm saying, that it's all about the action. But over here, we're gonna see from chapter 15 and on, that it's more, the Beinoni is more than just doing the action. The Beinoni, it's about realizing that my relationship with Hashem is also developing an emotion. Because eventually, I gave the example months ago about a rubber band. The more I'm repressed, I'm forcing myself to do the right thing, that my conscious is going to be involved in. But my subconscious is not really on board. My emotions are not really there. Eventually, there's repression. Eventually, it's going to feel heavy. Eventually, it's not going to be joyful. It may feel good for a while doing the right thing, but eventually, you snap. So what we need to do at this point of our private audience with the Rebbe is the Rebbe saying, how are you feeling inside? How does it feel for you doing this Beinoni work? And for that, we have to dig into your emotions a little bit. So if you look at it from a logical perspective, no, leave my emotions to myself. But over here, it's about, I want to be in a relationship with God, or let's say in the relationship with a spouse, you want to love what you're doing. It's not about what I'm it's not only about what I'm doing for the other person anymore. It's about being in a relationship with the other person, and therefore it doesn't matter if it's this or that. So for that, you have to really delve on in the emotions on the inside. And like Maddie's saying, setting an intention, I like that. So let's see, Mark. Wow, it's so nice to hear from you. How can we learn to enjoy the responsibilities? That's good, Mark. That's a great question. How can we learn to enjoy the responsibilities? We have to learn Tanya. We're going to see. So we're going to get the meditations to get the joy involved in it. But simply just realizing that God created an entire world and created an entire universe. And God says, I'm putting all that on the side. And all I care about is you. And this moment, if I'm going to choose to do the right thing or not, it's not just, it's Hashem is like watching and saying, what do you feel? What are you going to do? It's an incredible thing to meditate on. And we'll see through the chapters, different meditations and tools. So we got to get the right tools. But for now, it's, I'll just use a pretty famous words, is fake it until you make it. Even if you don't have the full joy, you still got to do it. Eventually, you could train yourself to get into a rhythm and a routine where this is the norm. This is what I enjoy. If a person goes on a diet, it's called, I think, the whole 30 days or something, where you take out sugar and flour. I don't know the exact diet, but you take out things. Eventually, you know what's going to happen. In the beginning, it's going to be very hard. Eventually, you're a little bit of sugar, just it hurts your stomach. Like you're not, like it makes you tired, or it makes you, it saps your, it's not, like you're not used to it anymore. So the more you do mitzvahs, even if at the beginning it's hard, eventually it's going to come the rhythm. But you're right, we have to get the joy involved in it. And for that, we need the right meditations. But for now, just think that just me doing what I'm doing as a mitzvah, it's something that's causing an incredible joy by Hashem. And that will cause it. Any parent, when I was a kid, and if I would see my mother cry, I would cry. I have no idea why she's crying, but for me, I'm crying because my mother's crying. If my mother was laughing, I was just so happy she's happy. If I know that I could be the one to derive that joy to my mother, it's the greatest joy. I'm causing my mother nachas, right? That's the Yiddish terminology for it. So if I'm doing this mitzvah, if I look at it as just its own thing, without no one's even knowing I'm doing it, no one really cares if I'm doing the right thing, you're right. It's an isolated act. But if I see that everything God ever wished for was for this mitzvah to take place, and God is putting the whole world on pause and saying, what's he or she going to choose? And for God, it's the only thing that's important. It's an incredible thing. So we need to understand Hasidus to really put that in perspective. Because what am I saying? God is taking care of peace in the Middle East and coming up with cures and so many things going on in the world now, and unity that we need more than ever, and healing. That to think that God is caring about what I'm doing seems petty almost. So for that, there's a whole nother discussion that God is not. That's an immature statement to say that God could only be there and not here. God cares infinitely. God is infinite. God is impotent. So omnipotent. So there's anyway. We'll have to discuss more. I think we're going to be going over time. But for now, L'chaim, realize that you and I have that power. God is waiting for us to be doing the right thing, and just doing the right thing causes a great joy by Hashem, and hopefully that could cause a joy by us. But realize that you already have it inherently to do the right thing, and the struggle. Don't drop it and say, you know what, I'm always going to be struggling. That's part of the beauty. It's part of the fight, and it's actually incredible. Just to end with this cute little, not so cute, but Chabad rabbis, we don't get grants, we don't get funding from any outside source other than community that believes in us and donates. We don't charge membership. It's all about people feeling inspired and understanding the power of tzedakah and supporting mitzvahs that are taking place every day and nurturing people. So there was once a Chabad rabbi who, maybe his mortgage, his debt, whatever it was, he came to the Rebbe in the 80s, and he said, enough already. Like, why can't, you're a miracle worker. Why can't you just make me win a lottery? And I'll be able to focus more on community without the need to raise funds. And Steve, you would enjoy the story. And the Rebbe said, I don't know the exact words, but something like, your community wouldn't be built if you had all the funding already. meaning your intensity is you're going out there, you have to knock on doors to cover your budget. It's almost that paycheck to paycheck. You actually build so many more relationships. You're so much more involved in your day to day because you need to work for every day. You need to work for every dollar, so to speak. And whether it's a fundraising in Chabad or whether it's whatever paycheck, you're so much more involved in what you're doing. A billionaire that has a business, little stories in his business doesn't care about a million here, a million there. But if it's someone whose every dollar counts, they're so much more involved in every detail. And that's the Beinoni. The Beinoni is someone who every moment is a struggle, and rising above it is an incredible joy by Hashem. So the Beinoni causes such a joy by Hashem that the tzaddik can't cause. That is chapter 15 in a nutshell. It's not about being a servant, it's about doing the service. You may not always attain the plateau, but just being in service and working through the struggle is the most incredible thing. Okay, well, then with that, one quick question. Why do you think it waits till chapter to choose the meditation? Awesome. So, you know what, Maddie, maybe I'll answer it quickly now, but I'll answer it again next week because that's really good. You know the expression, in case of emergency, break here? So Tanya starts with an emergency. I can't do the right thing. I can't control myself anymore. So the first thing is realize that you're normal. You have a godly soul and an animal soul, and whatever you're feeling makes sense. So, and what we have to do is empower our godly soul, be a Beinoni, realize they have impulse control. At that point, I'm not ready for meditations. I'm right now tempted to do that. You're going to give me a meditation? I don't even know how to meditate. Once we now understand that the mind controls the heart, and you could do it this 5 minutes, you could do it. You could do it the next 5 minutes. Eventually, we're out of that emergency where this week I've been good, but I don't know what's going to happen next week. Now let me introduce to you a meditation to dig more on the emotions. First, you have to focus on the most important part, which is the action, the behavior. How am I dealing with the world? Now I could focus on a meditation to make it more emotionally satisfying, to make it more emotionally driven. Yeah, all right, so we'll end with that. We are ramping up, yeah, so that's, we're getting to the next step in it. Okay, so, but Maddie, let's discuss that more next week and in chapter 16 to realize it's a beautiful flow of Tanya that we're learning and we're growing together. All right, we'll end with that. Thank you all for joining. L'chaim, and see you all next week.